and live. Mark, I'm really happy we finally did it. And we are very close because you are in London. I'm in Brighton. And today is also good, like 4 degrees. So I was almost celebrating. When it's 4 degrees and it's not raining, I thought, wow, this is the best day in the universe, which is weird. You know, if you are an Italian, you have a different expectations about the weather, but it's okay. So, Mark, I was expecting to have this conversation before the Ukraine situation, and was already a difficult situation in general, if you want to talk about marketing, you know, Brexit, pandemic, and so on. And now the Ukraine situation. So what's going on?
And as you say, you know, we were due to have this call, I think a week ago or 10 days ago, and it's just changed
Yeah,
so dramatically since then. Yeah, I mean, you know, as we're seeing it from the perspective of a global agency group, we're having to do what we can to hopefully move our people out, which is what we're trying to do. I mean, obviously there is restrictions on if you're a male aged 18 to 60. But we're working with our people to do that. We've also got a range of other companies that we work with that aren't necessarily Omnicom companies that we are again having to see how we can work with them to help them. I mean, I'm really clear with the people that we have that are over there, all Ukrainians working for us, that nothing matters from the point of view of work. That if they do want to work, then for distraction purposes, and of course they should, and that helps them. But just to make clear that we, as an organisation, are taking this incredibly seriously, and nothing matters in comparison to what they're going through.
What do you? I mean, how do you handle a situation like that? Because already, you know, with COVID, okay, it was locked down, people remotely like that. Here you go one step further. You have people, and maybe you have to help them to or go out the country or help them. How do you deal with that?
We have offices in obviously all countries, and countries like, for example, Poland. So where when people want to move, we can find homes, you know, I mean, as in offices
Right.
and locations for them, and of course support them financially. I mean, anyone that's in the region, that we are obviously continuing to financially support them. I mean, you just have to hope that the financial systems stay in place so that we can obviously continue to do that. And that's the other consideration that's now kind of emerging on us this week.
Got it. Let's talk about the marketing side. We do all the respect for the situation in Ukraine and Russia, but then you have companies that they have to try to communicate in this scenario, which is kind of it was already complicated before. Now it's gonna be even more complicated. First of all, if you have written the book before and after, would you have changed some kind of predictions or trends or topics after this Ukraine situation, or more or less what you kind of predicted stay in place?
Yeah, I don't think that the nature of what is in shift would necessarily be impacted by the geopolitical nature of what's happening currently in Ukraine. I think and perhaps you know, there's always we need to, you know, there's an important piece of communication that you make as an organization, the implicit signals you send to an organization. Perhaps we wouldn't have launched the book if it was around this time because of the sensitivities to the situation. So I think probably that's the thing I would say, that it's the more that those things about behaviors than it is about the actual specific content, because the content of the book is really talking about where marketing might go and how it might change based on lots of interviews. But I think really we probably would have held off actually on publishing or releasing the book, I should say.
Right. And you mentioned that you've been interviewing a lot of companies, head of marketing of great companies. I saw, I don't know, Volkswagen or companies like that. And let's start to unpack what do you think is happening here? How big brands are communicating? What's different? Why there is a shift? What kind of shift is in place?
Yeah, great. So, I mean, what I will start by saying is that every industry, largely every industry, profession experiences change, societal change, demographic change, technological driven change. So marketing services is not alone in that. When the change comes quite quick, it can have an impact on the nature of what it's like to work in those industries. So obviously marketing services is what we're focusing on, because we've had such dramatic change since I mean the iPhone, the launch of the iPhone in 2007 was really a firing gun for dramatic change, I think. And I think from there onwards, we saw so much development happening in our space from the point of view of how social sprang up, how data was then used, what you could then do with technology. That what that does to the mind of people working in marketing is it causes an anxiety, because people often fear they don't know things they should know. And it means people have to change, and organizations have to change. Now, one of the things that we picked out in the book was actually there's a correlation or a similarity between what organizations experience in those moments of change to what the individual experiences through life. So the way that when you have dramatic change in life, you go through a midlife crisis, for example, is one of many of the psychological changes. In a sense, we sort of felt that the industry is going through, or has been through, is currently going through a marketing midlife crisis. So we looked at the characteristics of midlife crises, and when you look at the characteristics of midlife crisis, you can go very, very quickly to see that's exactly what's happening, that's happening, that's happening, that's happening. And so that was interesting for us, because I think, particularly when we start to move into Web 3.3 space, we're now going to have the same thing again. You know, how many organizations we're working with now talking about, you know, what's our NFT strategy? And with that causes anxiety, and it causes sometimes a misplacement of focus. The agenda gets hijacked, and some brands can do serious damage to themselves because they focus on too much on things that are really important. And these things are, you know, NFT space is clearly going off. There's no question about that. But the revenue that could be generated might be a tiny percentage of the total revenue that the brand actually enjoys. And if the focus gets pulled too far away, it can have long-term impacts. So we document a lot of that in the book, and we've interviewed people and we've carried out surveys. So we kind of like structure it in a sort of an empirical way to get people to realize the symptoms, if you like, of this marketing midlife crisis and how they can try and avoid it.
Interesting. You mentioned Web3. I'm really into Web3. I've launched my NFT collection as a personal brand, and I'm chatting with a lot of people about Web3. Yesterday, for instance, I've been speaking with Stefano Rosso, Diesel. They're launching now a big NFTs, I think, in a couple of days, an NFT project. And but it's not only NFTs, metaverse, gaming. I mean, it's a lot of things there. And while I was chatting, Mark, I was thinking, it feels surreal, unreal to speak with a company about, I don't know, now, you know, our users will go in the metaverse, will get an NFT, and maybe they'll have a physical object. I mean, it felt like, wow. I mean, there are companies that are really into it, but majority of the people and companies still not there. So I wonder where are we, in your opinion, with this Web3 shift? It's just super early days. Big companies that you speak with already have like a strategy in place, unit. What's the situation there?
It's a great question, and I'm with you with that. I mean, I go between mindsets. You know, in one mindset, I'm sort of thinking, this is, you know, we've got to be in it. This is the future. This is happening now, and of course, it is, right. Unarguably, you think about the money that's pouring into crypto and NFTs, but the other part of me just goes, my God, we're spending so much time thinking about this. Well, actually, you know, surely this could be one of those big distractions. And then I go into Roblox and I kind of like look at some of the branded areas. And, you know, I mean, Vans World or Nike Land, I mean, you know, great. But for my generation, or even for perhaps people 10 years younger than me, am I going to spend a huge amount of time there? You know, that's so, you know, so I'm sort of, I struggle. I think that my sense is the NFT space is going off, no question, right? That we just know that's happening right now. And there's so much opportunity to generate revenues, to create communities off the back of them. To use DAOs to bring people into the organization and start to shape, you know, the direction of things. There's no question. As long as it doesn't hijack the agenda, the marketing agenda completely. That's the first thing. The second thing is the bigger opportunity, because in a sense, just like, you know, when you get a sort of a large wave coming, sometimes you get like a little, you know, sort of a sense of what's about to come. NFT space, I think, is a sense of what's about to come. And I think the metaverse, if you were to define the metaverse, it's hard to define, but let's take it, it's a sort of a virtual, shareable, unlimited, persistent, three-dimensional experience world, right? That we can all be in, unlimited. So unlimited amount of agents can be in there. So we can all be in, and it's persistent. So to have that, for that to exist, and it to be something that I would want to go into, and I'm obviously slightly older, but my brain, I'm quite interested in this stuff. So what would I be interested in? It has to be, in my mind, it has to be photorealistic. If
Right.
it's avatars, if it's all sort of like cartoony, no, if it's like Unreal's engine is used to create the metaverse, and it's basically a replica of our world, albeit augmented, with is it Super Universe? Is that the company that's selling plots of land? Is it Super
Decentraland and the
Decentralized?
Sandbox.
Well, there's a company that's selling plots of land. They've actually just basically carved up the physical world as we know it, and they're selling plots that you can buy. You can
All
buy,
right. Okay. And it's not
Super Universe, I
right.
think it is. Anyway, we'll find that. But if you have Unreal Engine and it's that, and the device is Apple cracks the device, and I can now do that, and I can walk along my high road now, and I can just remember what that shop is, and then I can go and experience it as opposed to going to a 2D where that will work. But
Right.
that's probably within the 10-year horizon now. I'd suggest probably somewhere between 5, 7, 10 years. That's the massive thing. So I think we need to start preparing for it. So building institutional knowledge with our clients, doing stuff in this space is important. Otherwise, you don't spot opportunities quick enough. So long rambling answer to your question, but I think so. What I'm saying is, it's mustn't hijack the agenda. Definitely do things in the short term, but prepare for something long term because it is going to transform everything.
Don't you think, Mark, that there is a big shift in marketing mentality with Web3? Because for me, I mean, I turned 50 this year, and I launched a lot of startups in my life, and always or working with big brands a lot of time. And the marketing meeting, it was always the same. Few people say, all right, guys, we're going to do this. Let's get an agency, a company. That's the strategy. We go. Okay, good. Then you see Bitcoin. They don't have a head of marketing. They don't have a marketing budget. And they are like a brand, $1 trillion brand. Or I see, these communities. Yesterday, I was on Twitter Spaces. And a random dude, 9643, random dude for the outside world, but in NFT space, like someone big. I mean, he got like 10,000 people listening to this guy who is anonymous, and the project, you don't even know where they are, who they are. I mean, it feels unreal again, but it's a complete shift of the way you see marketing with this community. Community is leading, with DAOs, and it's like you step back and you say, but if I step back, who decide the marketing strategy? So I don't know how a company can process this big change, if you see it also on your side.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you need to obviously keep in mind that when we talk about numbers sometimes, and numbers of individuals in communities and etc., they can seem quite big. But when you then work out the size of a category buyer base of any particular brand, it's sometimes it's really hard to get your head around how big that is. It's so vast. These are people that are medium, light, or heavy buyers of a brand that you need to constantly have. Well, not constantly, but you need to keep a level of awareness, saliency in their minds. Otherwise, your rate of sale drops and your brand gets delisted. And when you look at these communities and you divide them by the size, you realize how small they are, which doesn't mean they're not important, because particularly for certain categories and some startup brands that we might work with, they're fantastic, and they allow you to develop the products with people that are going to be advocates, and they can then communicate out. And of course, you can do things in these spaces. Like if you think about some of the work that Adidas has done in this space, they'll do stuff and then they'll broadcast it out through PR and other channels. So it doesn't mean that you're limited to these communities. But I think the other part of your question is a really, really interesting one, and that's the decentralization nature of things. How do you, when you've got people that are just effectively taking ownership of the product and shaping the way that the brand might develop through these communities, with suggestions that are being voted on through these mechanisms that sit within these platforms, if you do give control, which is a good thing for some organizations, you need to think about how you can steer that in an authentic way. You can't just jump into those environments as a sort of a marketing director and just ask them to talk about you. You've got to actually start to bring those communities into your own organization and ask them what they think. And actually, it's a very different engagement mechanism. It's probably going to mean that marketers are going to need to start hiring people that understand community operations or organizations. So how to connect in and build their communities with people for some categories. There is one more thing to say, Monty, on this also, which I think is an important one, is that if you think about Web 1.0, 2.0, when we navigated our clients through that space, in a sense, largely that period was Web 1 and Web 2 was largely a party, not exclusively, but largely a party for high interest category advertisers, where there was some form of lower funnel, and you get data and you target people, and there's a consideration journey they go through, and you revert, and that's why all the data and tech was important. For Web 3, it's largely a party, not for high consideration, but for high interest brands. So you don't necessarily be like an insurance company. We don't need to be a car manufacturer necessarily. You want to be someone like a brand that everyone's drawn to, wants to have a point of view of, and wants to engage with. Now, it doesn't mean that brands that aren't high interest can't play in that space. They can always join or try and come to the party, but it's not, the party isn't necessary for them. So I think it's an important point to make, because if you are Adidas, you can do NFTs and you can do collabs and etc. But if you're an insurance company, it's harder to do it, right? So it's almost the time now for the high interest category clients.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I never thought about it. How do you see social media playing out in this new scenario? Because I mean, I've spent probably last 9 years building a million of followers on different social media platforms, and I'm at the point where I say, oh gosh, like I'm so happy about this Web3, because these big platforms decide the reach that you have, and they can freeze you any second. I mean, it's a situation that you clearly understand that there is someone between you and your community. You are just a creator. You're not in an ownership economy. And the same brands has been, let's say, intermediate by the tech platforms. So do you think that this shift maybe helps and will help brands to get back the control of their relationship? I mean, are their clients, are not Facebook clients or YouTube clients? That said, I mean, we are here talking on social media, so thanks to, I don't know, Zach and whoever, otherwise wouldn't be possible, to create content like that. But probably there is a shift also there. What do you think?
Yes, I think the what's the new expression? Is it decentralized social? This new these new
decentralized social network, yes.
And so, I mean, you know more about this. So Discord would be within that, would it? With these two, or not?
Discord, I would say no, because Discord is still a platform, and well, you use it, you have this discussion. But I would say they could definitely, freeze your account. But at least you have your community and you talk there. It's like an old forum, like the discussion forum.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not hugely familiar with many decentralized social environments that have sprung up yet, unless they're just happening around within. I mean, are they? What have you seen of them? Are they? Where are these?
No, at the moment, it's not much. At the moment, it's not much. But my curiosity, Mark, was what do you think is the relationship now between brands and big social media platforms after all of these years, all of these investments? Great, marketing campaigns. Then the iOS OS change probably changed the advertising strategies. So what's the situation now? What's the relationship there?
Yeah, okay. So I think, brands are valuing what they have brought as a marketing tool, the ability to reach people based on their interest graph, to reach people in interesting new environments, new interesting ad formats, as you can imagine. They also appreciate the fact that their campaigns can go viral in these environments very easily. So I think I just want to say up front, I think brands, whether they state it or not, have benefited significantly from these new platforms.
Yeah.
I think as individuals that work within the brands in the marketing departments, I think there is quite naturally and understandably an anxiety about the impact that these platforms are having on society at large. I think, when we saw the Arab Spring, we got very excited about these platforms in terms of what they can, the shareability and the impact that can have in societies. But I think over time, we started to become much more anxious about the filter bubble, particularly when you have political events and people become more entrenched in their view because it keeps getting reinforced. And then, of course, because we're concerned about the next generation and again what they're seeing in this environment and the effect it has on their own minds. So I think people as individuals are worried and concerned. There's also the other issue where, as you said, again, it's hinted in your question, is the power that it gives to the social platforms to sort of restrict access to certain information. We had that around the pandemic, and when you have free speech, where's the line between free speech and speech that's crossed over the line and is now it's either inciting violence or it's pushing genuinely dangerous news. I mean, it's really hard to make that call. But these platforms have had to step in and make that. So then does that then stop them being a platform? Are they now a publisher because they're starting to edit the content? So some really interesting issues that we're having to work through, I think, from a political, societal, and of course, from a marketing perspective.
Well, what are some interesting strategies that you saw, I mean, in the last 12 months that you thought, wow, this was like a really smart move in this complicated period? Do you have any interesting case study to share?
We do. I mean, obviously, we've got a lot in our own organisation. I mean, I try not to do that as much as I can. I mean, I have to say, I think that if you look at, I mean, to take the Web3 space, then let's just look at. I mean, we talked about Adidas, so they moved quite quickly to do something I thought was really cool, where they, with the Bored Ape Yacht Club, they saw that as an opportunity. They took it upon themselves to buy one of the characters, I think for about $150,000.
Right.
And then they named it the character, and then they created content around it. I thought that was quite novel. They did that before the Prada. The next thing they followed that was the Prada collaboration with Zach Liverman, where they created the digital artwork, which became an NFT. I thought that was good, but I thought actually there was something really inventive in actually buying a character and then turning that into a character. And I think that's what I would suggest is a really good, interesting use of this new space. Is not just doing the obvious, let's create an NFT and sell it as the digital artwork, but actually doing stuff where you create something and perhaps you sell an NFT that's linked to the product. So the only way you can buy the product is by the NFT, and then that then allows you to create the community. And then, so use the NFT simply as a kind of gateway to do something really, really interesting. So I think that's, I mean, beyond the classic marketing innovations that we see all the time, I think that's a really interesting space that people can explore, because then you're starting to be able to talk about this new space, but on a broad scale level. So you're able to reach more minds, and of course it starts to increase people's awareness of the brand because you're doing something slightly different.
Can you take me? Yeah, please.
No, one more thing about that is it's an opportunity to create one exposure to the brand that can shape the brand dramatically. So a lot of what advertising agencies are doing is trying to get the highest amount of reach and frequency exposure, so we can start to gradually change people's minds over many exposures, and that of course works, but sometimes you can create something that's so dramatic it changes the brand immediately, people's perceptions immediately. So it's like a one hit sort of move. And I think that's the thing that we can probably look at this space for, is to do something that leaves people kind of changed. They go, wow, that brand did a collaboration with that brand, and that's now made me completely rethink that brand off the back of that collaboration, and they're doing this amazing cool thing. I think that's what we should try and use these opportunities for.
Yeah. By the way, Mark, I totally agree. I've tried, for instance, when I launched my collection, which is easier because a personal brand is easier and is all about access, is a pass to events, experiences, collaboration, deals. Is just a tool to give you an access to a lot of things. So I think is a great utility. NFT, I think, is a great way to go. I was curious, Mark, if you can take us behind the scenes of a Zoom meeting with a client that want to launch a marketing campaign. And how does it work? Where do you start from? I mean, what are the, let's say, what's your framework? How you think about a marketing campaign? Then maybe it's a global marketing campaign, and every country is different, cultures are different. I would have no idea where to start from. So I would like to understand how you approach this kind of kickoff meeting.
Yeah, of course. So every category, every brand is completely different. But if you were to take a typical, if you can do this, typical advertiser, you would say, start with you try and understand with them through research, what is the category? Who buys this category that you're in? What are the people buying the category? What do they like? What are their motivations? When you are, if it's an FMCG category, the moment you're in shelf, when you're reaching your hand out and you're about to think about the different options, what's going through that person's mind, either consciously or unconsciously? And we try to understand what are what we call the need states. So if you're buying a soft drink, need states might be thirst quench, something to have with food. It could be post-exercise. It could be, so it might be 5, 6, 7, 8 different need states. And then you want to size those need states. What are the big ones? And then once you work out what are the 3 or 4 or 5 big ones, you then want to work out how mentally linked your brand is to that need state. So literally, what are the synaptic connections in your mind between people's minds between that brand and between the category, the need state, and your brand? So for example, we carry out analysis where you say, ask people to say, when you think about a soft drink for hydration, which brand comes to mind first? Yeah. And then you might find that your brand is actually the fourth most thought of brand. So you say, right, okay, for 2023, we're going to build synaptic connections between that need state and our brand. So it's all about, for example, if it's about hydration, so then that becomes an important part. So that's an important foundational element that gets put in place. And then from there, you start to size that audience and then think about the channels that you might want to use to reach them using post research from market mix modeling. I know you're familiar with econometric modeling, where you can look at the incremental impact of revenue from different channels. And you carry all that research through and you create your strategy. And then off the back of that, you then say, here's an innovative way of doing hydration. Why don't we go to first person ever to go to, I don't know, I'm just making this up, right? Water parks, and we're going to basically brand those. We're going to create our own water park, and it's going to be called this. And then that's going to be a product we're going to basically communicate en masse with people. And so whatever it is, but all of that thinking is coming from understanding the either conscious or unconscious motivation to purchase. And that's a really important thing. And a lot of research over the many years has been done, has focused too much on the audience itself, and trying to understand who they are, as opposed to understanding what their motivations are. And I think there's a sort of movement over time, focusing on what are the need states and focus on that more than understanding too much about them that's not applicable. So we do that in our organization. We have realized that creativity and innovation is essential. So when we do that, we get able to build all that strategic thinking in a platform environment, not doing it in PowerPoint, and then we turn the whole thing into a game. So when you join PhD, you build your campaigns in this platform environment. It's called Omni Studio. And when you're building a campaign, everyone else can see your campaign as you're building it. And then they can collaborate with you. And then when they suggest ideas, as I'm working, I'm getting ideas coming from around the world. Some from Hong Kong might be coming from an idea. And I've got 3 buttons to push, either amazing, like, or okay. And that person gets pings based on, which are like points based on the quality of their ideas. And everyone's competing on a live leaderboard. So the whole thing, if you join PhD, you're joining a media agency, of course, but you're also joining a massively multiplayer online game. And everyone, you compete. We want to make work addictive, because if work is addictive, then work is no longer a chore. It's no longer something you have to do to kind of fund your life. Instead, I want people to wake up every morning, look on the app, and see the performance of themselves overnight. And there was one thing, actually. There was a game designer who did his degree or his MBA in understanding games, and after the whole work, his study, all of his analysis, he said that actually his conclusion is that work is a game that's so badly designed you have to pay people to play it. So if you just reconfigure work to make it addictive and make it fun, and that's what we're trying to do.
Interesting, really interesting. This needs states and analysis of motivation. And you said before, sometimes you can change very quickly
Yeah.
the perception of the brand if you pick the right thing.
Yeah.
What's the different weight today between social media, television, radio? I imagine depends by, I'm thinking in Italy, television is still like, oh my God, television said, and I think, wow, really still, in Italy still like that? Yes. So how do you perceive the balance now between digital and traditional media?
Yeah, linear TV, which is obviously traditional TV as we would know it, is dropping off. We're seeing a rationing down of what was the most dominant channel in terms of reach. People are migrating to other channels. I mean, in some cases, the audiences are migrating to the catch-up and OTT services that the traditional linear TV broadcasters provide. But some of them, of course, are moving into YouTube. The biggest issue is that we're seeing people disappearing behind a paywall, and they're moving into the subscription video on demand services like Netflix's of the world and Amazon Prime's. And when that happens, we then have a big issue because people are harder to find and harder to reach. That is causing, in a sense, a greater focus in our industry on other ways of reaching people. So that might be in social channels. It's going to drive people into the Web3 space, of course, but also in things like partnerships. And there was a fantastic partnership between Netflix and I think it was Ben and Jerry's, and they had branding on both environments. I just think those are sorts of things that we would need to think about more as we basically try to reach people. As they're disappearing behind the paywalls. So that's really what's happening. Of course, you're seeing huge increases in all the social platforms as you'd expect, and what it's having to do also is it's making us have to think about attention. So I don't know how familiar you are with this, but attention levels are a new area of interest for marketers. The degree to which anyone is actually attending their mind to that environment. We're carrying out a lot of research in this space as a group to understand the attention levels of, for example, a YouTube versus an Instagram post, and then factor that all into it. Because if you got in the past, you'd have a 30-second TV ad, 15-second TV ad. Now you've got multiple formats and vertical videos, all bought in different ways across different platforms. Some are used in different, you're multi-screening, and so there's such a great opportunity to waste money now.
Yeah, attention. And what about TikTok? That has exploded. Is something that is now, let's say, in your priority list, or is just one of the platforms?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, and a lot of brands will have will think of a TikTok approach. What's the TikTok strategy? Because it's so important, particularly for certain generations and certain audiences that we're trying to reach, and how they can put activity in there which is organic, that feels native and natural, but also can be fueled with paid across, and including other platforms. So they're all linked together, and of course, behind all of this, you've got data driving everything. You got this world now we're in where we are constantly thinking about the different audiences we're targeting, and we have at some point Google, I think it's end of next year, they said they're going to switch off the third-party cookie. So we're no longer going to have access, so we won't be able to target people on a third-party cookie basis. We'll need to start using other approaches, which is leading to a development in a space called clean rooms, where you can work with third-party organizations. So we could work with a retailer, for example, or an insurance company if we felt that was relevant, and we could onboard their audiences into a clean room environment that's privacy compliant and is compliant with all the GDPR rules. And then from that environment, that data can be hashed in a safe way, and then it can be used for targeting. So it's going to lead to a revolution, or certainly an increase in the amount of activity that agencies are doing in the data space, and how we're combining data sources together. This is, and it's just a continuation of what's happening to agencies. Agencies 20 years ago were creative businesses fundamentally. Today they are technology/creative businesses, which is leading to a change to the sort of people that we need to have working for these companies. You know, we're not just hiring creative teams anymore. We're hiring data analysts and data scientists and data technologists and people that can build machine learning algorithms. And there's a very different organization now, and there's a war on that talent. I mean, the talent that we're looking for at the moment, everyone's after them. You know, that younger generation as they come out of university.
A final advice, Mark, for companies that are listening to our conversation and they think, all right, what are we going to do in the next 12 months with this, you know, situation, everything going on? What would be the best advice and best approach to have?
I would suggest so I'm thinking I'm thinking just about marketing organizations as opposed to ad agencies and media agencies. I would say hiring in leadership skill sets in these new spaces and allowing hiring experts as leadership roles so hiring in someone is, hiring someone who's head of web, if you're the right sort of client and you're a high interest category, hiring someone who's head of Web3. Hire them young, right? If that's, if you have to find someone who's perhaps 10 years ahead of their time, and then ask them how they think you should do it. So don't do it. Hire the people that are going to be better at making that judgment. And that's whether it's across developing head of conversational AI, head of Web3, head of cloud and clean room development technologies, head of, whatever it is, each of these different areas, go and hire the experts and bring them in and allow them to shape.
Love it. Mark, thank you so much. And good luck for everything. Good luck for Shift and good luck for all of your activities.
Fantastic. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you.